Daniel Harris had always lived a quiet life in the Arizona Territory, far away from busy towns and crowded places. His small wooden cabin stood near a line of tall pine trees, and the land around it was wide and open. Most days were peaceful. The air smelled of dry earth, warm sun, and fresh wood smoke from his stove. Daniel liked this slow life. He liked waking up before sunrise, taking care of his chores, and listening to the soft sounds of nature that surrounded him. He often said that silence was his favorite companion. On this particular afternoon, the sky was turning a pale yellow as the sun began dipping lower. Daniel had gone down to the creek to fill 2 buckets with water, a chore he had done so many times that he knew every step of the path. The creek wasn't far from his cabin, but it always felt like a small break from routine. Sometimes he saw rabbits or deer there, drinking quietly before running away into the bushes. Today was calm, and as he walked back, the buckets heavy in his hands, Daniel's thoughts were on nothing more than warming his cabin for the cold night ahead. But when he reached the clearing where his cabin stood, something felt different. At first, he couldn't tell what it was. The cabin looked the same. The trees were the same. The light wind blowing across the tall grass was the same, but the feeling in the air was not. It felt like someone else was there. Daniel slowed down, his eyes moving across the open space. Then he saw her. A young Apache girl, no older than 14 or 15, stood near the corner of his cabin. Her clothes were dusty, her feet a little dirty from walking, and her long dark hair hung around her face in gentle waves. She looked thin, tired, and uncertain. Her hands were clasped together, and her eyes followed Daniel carefully, as if she was afraid he might tell her to leave. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Daniel stood still with both buckets hanging from his hands. The girl stayed close to the wall of the cabin, as if she wasn't sure she was allowed to be there. The wind rustled softly between them, and a bird cried out in the distance. Daniel was the first to speak, though his voice came out a bit unsure. "Hello there," he said gently. "Are you lost?" The girl hesitated. Her lips parted, but no sound came at first. She swallowed, then stepped forward a little, her voice quiet and shaking. "Please," she began, and Daniel noticed the way she held her arms around herself, as if she was trying to stay warm. "Please, let me stay with you tonight." Daniel blinked. He had never had a visitor like this before, especially not one so young, and certainly not someone from the Apache community. He knew some settlers were nervous around the Apache people, and the Apache people had their reasons to be cautious around settlers as well. But the girl standing in front of him did not carry anger or threat. She carried exhaustion, fear, and hope. Just a little, soft hope. She continued speaking, her voice becoming steadier. "I will help you," she said. "I can put the log in the stove. I know how to keep the fire strong. I can work. Please let me stay." Daniel felt a gentle tug in his chest. There was something in her eyes that reminded him of a lost fawn he once found in the woods on a winter day. Shivering, unsure, but trusting him because there was no one else to trust. He set the buckets down slowly so he didn't startle her. "What's your name?" Daniel asked softly. The girl took in a slow breath. "Nalin," she said. "That's a beautiful name," Daniel replied. "I'm Daniel." Nalin nodded slightly. She didn't step closer, but she didn't back away either. She looked like she was ready to run if she had to, but also like she desperately hoped she wouldn't need to. Daniel took another careful step, but kept a respectful distance. "Are you cold?" he asked. She nodded. "Have you been walking for a long time?" She nodded again. Her eyes began to shine, the way eyes do when someone is trying hard not to cry. Daniel felt a deep sympathy rise in him. He did not know what had happened to her, but he didn't need details to see she needed help. and there was nothing in her expression that suggested she meant any harm. "You can come inside," he said at last, his voice calm and warm. "Just for tonight. You can rest and warm yourself by the fire." Nalin didn't move at first, as if she thought maybe she had misunderstood him. But when Daniel opened the cabin door and stepped aside, she finally took a small step forward, then another, and another, until she reached the doorway. Inside the cabin, the air was cooler than outside. Daniel had not yet started the evening fire. The room was simple: a wooden table, 2 chairs, a small shelf with a few books, a bed against one wall, and the iron stove in the corner. The floor creaked softly as Nalin stepped in. Daniel followed her, closing the door behind them. He could see the slight tremble running through her arms as she looked around. She seemed unsure of where to stand or what to do. "You can sit if you like," Daniel said gently. "Or you can help me with the fire, like you offered. Whatever makes you comfortable." Nalin looked toward the stove, then back at Daniel. After a moment, she knelt down beside it. She picked up a small piece of wood and looked to Daniel for approval. When he nodded, she placed it inside the stove carefully. Daniel admired her focus. Even in her tired state, she moved with careful intention, like someone who understood the value of small tasks. Daniel handed her another piece. She placed it inside too, then sat back a little as Daniel lit the fire. The flames caught slowly, then grew warm and steady. The soft orange glow spread through the cabin, touching Nalin's face and giving her a gentle warmth that she welcomed with closed eyes. After a few moments, Daniel spoke again. "Are you hungry?" Nalin opened her eyes and nodded a little. "A little," she said. Daniel prepared a simple meal: cornbread, beans, and warm water with a bit of honey stirred in. He placed a small portion in front of her. At first she hesitated, unsure if she was allowed to start eating before he did. When Daniel picked up his spoon and took a bite, she quietly followed. She ate slowly at first, then with more comfort. Her face softened, and Daniel noticed her shoulders relax for the first time since he saw her outside. When they finished eating, the fire had filled the room with a steady heat. The shadows on the walls moved calmly. Outside, darkness settled across the land like a soft blanket. Nalin sat close to the stove, warming her hands. Daniel watched her for a moment, then asked, "Is there someone looking for you? Family, maybe?" Nalin lowered her eyes. "I was with my family," she said quietly, "but I cannot find them now." Her tone held sadness, but not fear of him. "I will go back to them. But tonight, I needed a place to stay. I did not want to sleep outside." "That's all right," Daniel said. "You're safe here tonight." She looked at him with gentle gratitude, the kind that came from deep inside her heart. "Thank you," she whispered. Daniel nodded, feeling that simple thank you settle into the quiet air of the cabin. There was still much he did not know about the girl sitting beside his stove, and much she probably wasn't ready to tell. But for now, she had warmth, food, and safety, and that was enough. The fire crackled softly. Daniel prepared a small blanket for her and set it near the warmest part of the room. Nalin curled up carefully, resting her head on her arm. Her eyes grew heavy, and soon she drifted into a peaceful sleep. Daniel watched her for a moment, then turned down the lantern. Outside, the wind whispered across the land, but inside the cabin, everything was calm. And that was how the unexpected night began, with a tired girl's trembling request and a simple kindness that changed the quiet rhythm of Daniel's life. The night passed quietly inside the little cabin. The fire in the stove kept glowing softly, spreading a warm orange light across the wooden floor. Daniel slept lightly, as he always did when someone else was under his roof. He wasn't worried, only aware. Every now and then he opened his eyes to check on Nalin, making sure she was sleeping comfortably. She did not move much, except to adjust the blanket around her shoulders. By early morning, the sky outside began turning pale. A soft, gray light slipped through the cabin window. The air had grown cooler after the fire died down during the night. Daniel sat up on his bed and stretched his arms. He listened to the peaceful stillness before standing and walking quietly toward the stove. He didn't want to wake Nalin too soon, but she was already awake. Daniel noticed her sitting cross-legged near the stove, her eyes half open, as she watched the remaining embers inside. She looked a little brighter today, as if a good night's rest had brushed away some of the worry written on her face yesterday. Still, she looked cautious, as if she wasn't sure what to expect from the new day. "Good morning," Daniel said in a gentle voice. Nalin blinked, then nodded slowly. "Good morning. You slept all right?" Daniel asked. She nodded again. "Yes. It was warm here, thank you." Daniel gave a small smile. "I'm glad." He added 2 small pieces of wood to the stove. Nalin watched him for a moment, then moved forward and reached for another log. She placed it inside exactly the right way to help the fire grow. Daniel noticed how sure her hands were, how naturally she handled the wood. She had clearly learned these skills young. "You really do know how to work a stove," he said with a kind laugh. She looked at him with surprise, almost as if she wasn't used to being complimented for simple tasks. "My grandmother taught me," she said softly. "She says warm hands make warm hearts." "That's a good saying," Daniel replied. The room warmed slowly as the fire grew stronger. Nalin stretched her fingers toward the heat with quiet satisfaction. Daniel prepared breakfast, cornmeal mush with a little honey. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm and filling. While they ate, Daniel noticed Nalin's eyes wandering around the cabin. She seemed curious, but didn't touch anything. Her gaze paused on the books on his small shelf, the wooden tools hanging on the wall, and the single photograph of Daniel's parents resting on the table. She didn't ask questions, but her eyes were full of quiet interest. After a few minutes of silence, Daniel decided to gently begin a conversation. "If you feel comfortable," he said kindly, "you can tell me what happened yesterday. Only if you want to." "Of course." Nalin lowered her spoon. She took a slow breath before speaking. Her voice was quiet, but steady enough to show she trusted him a little more now. "I was walking with my family," she said. "We were traveling to join my mother's relatives. They live far from here, beyond the Red Hills." Daniel nodded to show he was listening. "We walked for many days. Then yesterday we stopped to rest near the river." She paused, searching for the right words. "While we were resting, I went to gather berries. I did not go far, but when I came back, I could not find them." Her eyebrows pinched with worry, but she didn't sound angry, more confused than anything. "I looked and looked," she continued, "but the ground had many footprints from the people in my group. It was hard to tell which way they went, and then the sun was going down, and I didn't know where to sleep." Daniel listened carefully. Her story carried no blame, only the sadness of someone who suddenly found herself alone. "It happens sometimes when people travel in large groups," he said gently. "They move fast, and if someone steps away, the group might not see right away." Nalin nodded. "My family will look for me. I know they will. But I needed a safe place for one night." She looked at him with sincere eyes. "I did not want to sleep where animals or cold air could reach me." "Well," Daniel said with warmth in his voice, "you made the right choice to find shelter, and you're welcome here for as long as you need." Her lips lifted just a little, a small, grateful smile. After breakfast, Nalin helped Daniel with a few simple chores. He didn't ask her to work. She simply began helping on her own. She swept the floor with careful strokes, carried small bits of firewood from the pile outside, and even washed the wooden bowls they had used. Daniel appreciated her help, but made sure she didn't feel like she had to do anything. He knew she was already tired from her long journey the day before. While working side by side, Daniel asked her gentle, harmless questions, always making sure not to pry too deeply. "Have you lived in this area your whole life?" "Most of it," she replied. "My people move sometimes, but not too far." "What do you like doing when you're not traveling?" She thought for a moment. "I like making things with my hands. Necklaces, baskets, things like that. They calm me." "I understand that," Daniel said. "I do woodworking sometimes. It's nice to make something with your own hands." Nalin nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, it feels like your thoughts become quieter." Daniel smiled. "Exactly." For a while they worked quietly, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind of silence that forms when two people feel safe in each other's company. Around midday, Daniel stepped outside to check the sky. The air was crisp, and faint clouds were stretching across the horizon. Nalin followed him outside and looked around the land. Her eyes scanned the distance, not with fear but with gentle longing. "They will come for me," she said, almost to herself. "I know they will." "I'm sure they will," Daniel replied reassuringly. "And until then, we will think of a way to help you find them." She looked at him with quiet trust. "Thank you, Daniel." He nodded, feeling a warm sense of responsibility. Not the heavy kind, but the kind that comes naturally when someone needs you and you know you can help. As the sun rose higher, they walked a little way around the cabin so Daniel could gather more firewood. Nalin stayed close, not because she was afraid, but because she didn't want to wander too far again. While Daniel chopped small branches, Nalin gathered sticks and sorted them into neat piles. She hummed softly to herself, a gentle tune that drifted peacefully through the trees. It was the first time Daniel heard her hum, and it made him smile. "You have a nice voice," he said. She paused, surprised. "I didn't know you heard." "It was nice," Daniel said. "A peaceful sound." Her cheeks warmed in a shy smile as she continued her work. As the afternoon light softened, they returned to the cabin. Daniel lit the stove again, and Nalin sat near it, warming her hands. She looked more relaxed now, the tightness in her shoulders nearly gone. The warmth seemed to melt the last bit of fear she had carried from the night before. After a while, she looked up at him. "Daniel," she said quietly, "you are kind." Daniel shook his head lightly. "I'm just doing what anyone should do." "Not everyone does," she replied with honesty. Her words touched him more than he expected. He didn't respond right away, but he felt something shift gently inside him. A deep respect for this young girl who had walked so far, stayed so brave, and still kept kindness in her heart. As the day slowly faded into evening, Nalin helped prepare a simple dinner. They talked a little, worked a little, and enjoyed the warmth of the fire. The cabin, once silent and lonely, now felt alive with soft footsteps and quiet conversation. And though neither of them said it out loud, they both felt the same quiet truth growing between them. The world outside was uncertain, but inside this little cabin, they had found a small piece of peace. The next morning arrived with a soft, pale light. The sky outside the cabin looked peaceful, touched with shades of early blue and gray. Daniel woke early, as he always did, and prepared a small pot of warm water for tea. The gentle sound of the kettle warming filled the quiet room. Nalin was still asleep, wrapped snugly in the blanket Daniel had given her. He let her rest for a while longer. She had walked so much the day before, and even though she looked better, she still carried a tiredness that rested deep in her eyes. Daniel quietly stepped outside to check the weather and gather a bit of wood for the morning fire. The air was cold, colder than the previous day. A small, thin layer of frost covered the ground, giving everything a silvery shine. Daniel looked toward the horizon, noticing the faint shapes of distant hills. The day looked calm, but something in the wind told him the weather might change soon. After a few minutes, he carried the wood back inside. When he opened the door, he saw Nalin sitting up, rubbing her eyes gently. She gave him a sleepy smile, the kind that came only from feeling safe. "Good morning," she said softly. "Good morning," Daniel replied. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes," she said, pulling the blanket a little closer around herself. "It was warm." "I'm glad. Breakfast will be ready soon." Nalin helped him prepare the meal, moving a little slower than usual, but with the same careful attention she always showed. She stirred the warm porridge while he poured tea into 2 small cups. The familiar morning tasks made the cabin feel peaceful, almost like they had been sharing mornings like this for weeks instead of days. They ate quietly, enjoying the warmth from the stove. Nalin looked thoughtful, her eyes drifting toward the window every few minutes. "Are you thinking about them?" Daniel asked gently. She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. I hope they are close. I hope they know I am fine." "I'm sure they do," Daniel said kindly. "Families have a way of feeling when someone they love is safe." Nalin seemed comforted by the idea. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly. After breakfast, Daniel stepped outside again, to check the sky once more, to listen to the wind, and to see if anything had changed in the quiet land around him. Nalin followed a few minutes later. She stood beside him, looking toward the distant hills. Her hair moved gently in the cool morning breeze. "It is very open here," she said softly. "Yes," Daniel replied. "A person can see far, but sometimes that also means others can see far too." She looked at him, puzzled. Daniel didn't want to frighten her. He simply said, "Sometimes travelers pass through here. Some are friendly, some just want to keep moving. It is good to stay aware." Nalin nodded with understanding. They walked a little around the cabin, checking the small garden and the neat stack of wood. Daniel showed Nalin how he kept a small supply of dried herbs and vegetables stored in a wooden box. She looked at everything with quiet interest, asking small questions. "Do you live here all year?" she asked. "Most years, yes. It gets cold in winter, but this cabin keeps me warm." "Do you feel lonely?" she asked in a gentle voice. Daniel paused. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but the land keeps me company, and I like the peaceful days." She looked around again, her eyes soft. "It is peaceful," she agreed. Just as they were about to head inside again, Daniel noticed something in the distance. A faint, thin trail of dust rising from the land far beyond the cabin. It was small, almost invisible, but it was there, like the trace of someone moving along the open ground. Daniel didn't react suddenly. He simply narrowed his eyes and watched quietly. Nalin followed his gaze. "What is it?" she asked. "Someone traveling," Daniel said, keeping his tone calm. "Maybe a group. Hard to tell from here." Nalin's expression changed slightly. Not fear, just alertness. She moved a bit closer to Daniel as if trying to see more clearly. "Could it be my family?" she asked hopefully. Daniel shook his head gently. "I'm not sure. They would normally travel in different patterns, and there would be other signs. But don't worry. It might just be riders passing through. They travel this way sometimes." Nalin nodded slowly, though her eyes stayed on the horizon. As the dust trail grew a little larger, Daniel knew they should remain careful. Not because of danger, but because unexpected visitors could bring questions Nalin might not be ready for. He didn't want her to feel pressured or exposed. "Let's go inside for now," he said softly, "just until we know who it is." Nalin followed him back into the cabin. Once inside, she moved toward the stove and warmed her hands again. She didn't look afraid, only thoughtful. "Do we need to hide?" she asked quietly. "Not yet," Daniel answered gently. "Let's wait and see. Sometimes people pass without stopping." Nalin nodded, though Daniel could tell she was thinking deeply. After a few moments, she asked, "If someone does come, what should I do?" Daniel took a seat at the table and thought carefully. "If it looks like they want to talk or ask questions, you can stay in the back room. There's a small space behind the curtain where you can rest. I'll speak with them first." She nodded slowly. "I understand." Her calmness impressed Daniel. She didn't panic, didn't rush, didn't worry out loud. She simply listened and accepted the moment with quiet strength. As the morning passed, the dust trail grew, then faded, then appeared again. Daniel checked it from time to time without letting Nalin see too much concern. By early afternoon, the light changed. It became clearer that a small group of riders was traveling across the open land, not heading straight toward the cabin, but passing close enough that their presence could not be ignored. Nalin noticed the change in Daniel's face. "Are they coming here?" she asked softly. "Maybe not," Daniel said. "They look like they're passing by, but we'll stay careful." Nalin took a slow breath. "I can stay in the back room now, just to be safe." Daniel nodded. "If you want to, yes." She stood and walked quietly to the little back room separated by a simple cloth curtain. Before stepping inside, she looked once more at Daniel. "Thank you," she said. Daniel smiled gently. "You're safe here." Nalin slipped behind the curtain just as the faint sound of distant hoofsteps floated through the air. It was soft, almost like a heartbeat far away. Daniel remained calm. He checked the stove, straightened a few things on the table, and stood quietly near the door. He wasn't nervous, just aware. The sound grew a little louder, then steadied. After several minutes, it began to fade again. Daniel peeked out the window and saw the group moving across the land, not turning toward the cabin but continuing on their path. He waited until the sound was completely gone before speaking. "They've passed," Daniel said gently. Nalin stepped out from behind the curtain. Her face relaxed, though she still looked thoughtful. "They didn't stop," she said softly. "No," Daniel replied. "Just travelers moving along." She walked slowly to the stove and sat down again. "I'm glad they didn't stop," she said quietly. Daniel nodded. "Me too. But even if they had, everything would have been all right." Nalin looked up at him with calm trust. "I believe you." The rest of the afternoon passed peacefully. The cabin felt warm and safe again. They worked on small tasks, talked a little, and even shared a few quiet smiles. But both of them knew something unspoken. The world outside might be unpredictable, but inside the cabin they had built a space of calm, and even as the day turned to evening, neither felt alone. The next morning arrived quietly, almost too quietly. A soft mist rested over the land outside the cabin, giving the world a gentle, dreamlike look. Daniel stepped outside early, letting the cool air settle around him. The silence felt deeper than usual, as if the land was thinking. He looked toward the hills, then toward the open fields. Nothing moved except the slow drift of mist. Inside, Nalin was folding the blanket she had used. She placed it neatly on the bed and smoothed the surface with her small hands. When Daniel walked back inside, she looked at him with calm eyes. "Good morning, Daniel," she said softly. "Good morning, Nalin. Did you sleep well?" Yes, very well. She offered a small smile. Your cabin feels like a safe place. Daniel returned the smile. I'm glad you feel that way. They prepared a simple breakfast together, moving with gentle familiarity. It was easy now, how she handed him the wooden bowl before he reached for it, how he poured warm tea without asking if she wanted some. They had become comfortable in each other's presence, even though they had known each other only a short time. There was a natural kindness between them that made the space quiet but warm. After they finished eating, Nalin stood near the window. Her expression was thoughtful, and her gaze stretched far across the open land. What are you thinking? Daniel asked softly. I wonder if my family is close by, she said. Sometimes, when the wind is quiet like this, my grandmother says it means someone is thinking of you. Daniel nodded slowly. Maybe they're thinking of you right now. Nalin smiled at that, but her eyes still held a hint of longing. I want to find them. I know they must be worried. I think I am ready to go back toward the place they were heading. Daniel listened carefully. He knew this moment would come. He also knew she couldn't simply walk out into the land alone. It was wide, open, and confusing for someone with no clear direction. You shouldn't travel alone, he said gently. The land is too big, and you might end up going the wrong way again. I know, she said quietly, but what can I do? Daniel looked around the cabin, then at Nalin's calm but hopeful face. The decision settled inside him like a soft weight. I'll walk with you, he said. Nalin blinked, surprised. You will? Yes, Daniel replied. At least part of the way. You can show me the hills you recognize, and once you feel sure your family is near, I'll return home. Her face softened with gratitude, the kind that made her eyes shine with quiet warmth. Thank you, Daniel, she whispered. You are very kind. I just want you to get back safely, he said. For the next hour, they prepared for the journey. Daniel packed a small bag with dried fruit, cornbread, and a flask of water. He also wrapped an extra blanket for Nalin and gave her a pair of sturdy gloves so her hands wouldn't become cold. Nalin helped by filling a small pouch with herbs she recognized near the cabin, soft leaves that helped with calm breathing and light tiredness. She tied the pouch carefully and placed it in Daniel's bag. When everything was ready, they stepped outside. The mist had lifted and the land stretched wide and open before them. The sun peeked through a thin layer of clouds, painting the ground with soft golden light. Which way? Daniel asked gently. Nalin pointed toward a distant line of hills. That way. Beyond those. My family was heading east from there. Daniel nodded. All right, we'll walk slowly. They started their journey with steady steps. The ground was cool but firm beneath their feet. Small patches of grass brushed lightly against their legs. As they walked, the open air filled with soft sounds, birds calling from the trees, the wind passing through dry leaves, the gentle crunch of dirt beneath their shoes. Nalin walked close, but not too close, giving both of them space to move comfortably. From time to time, she pointed out familiar things. That tree? We passed a group like that, she said quietly. And the ground here, she added later, gently touching the soil with her fingers. It feels like the land we walked on before. Daniel listened carefully. Each small detail she recognized brought them closer to the direction she needed. After a few hours, they reached the bottom of the first hill. Daniel suggested they rest, and they sat on a flat rock nearby. Nalin drank water from the flask, then handed it back politely. As they rested, she looked at Daniel with a thoughtful expression. You don't have to do this, she said. You could have stayed home and been comfortable. Daniel rested his elbows on his knees. I know, he said, but I wouldn't feel comfortable knowing you were out here alone. Nalin looked down, touched by his answer. "I'm very thankful," she whispered. They continued walking when their energy returned. The land changed slowly as they moved farther from the cabin. More tall shrubs grew near the hills, and the ground had more red-brown tones. Nalin often paused, looking around with growing recognition. "I remember this," she said softly at one point. "We rested near a place like this." Daniel smiled gently. "Then we're on the right path." As the afternoon sun warmed the land, they reached the top of a small ridge. From there, the view opened wide, stretching so far they could see tiny dots of distant trees and the gentle lines of dry riverbeds. Nalin stood still, scanning the land carefully. Daniel watched her. He didn't interrupt her thoughts. He wanted her to feel everything clearly. After a long moment, Nalin said, "We should go toward the right side of those hills. My family likes to travel near water, even small water. They always look for good places to rest." Daniel nodded, happy she remembered such details. They walked again, the journey gentle but steady. As they followed the slope down the ridge, the trees grew taller, and the wind carried a fresh scent of green leaves. Daniel took a deep breath. "It smells like a place where people might stay for a little while," he said. "Yes," Nalin agreed softly. "My family likes places with this smell." They reached a small clearing and stopped to rest again. Daniel sat on a smooth stone. Nalin knelt beside a patch of soft grass. The sunlight lit her face, making her look calm and thoughtful. "Do you miss them a lot?" Daniel asked gently. She nodded. "Very much. My grandmother tells stories every night. My father always watches the stars. My mother likes to sing while she cooks." She smiled softly. "I want to hear them again." "You will," Daniel said. "We're getting closer." Nalin looked toward the hills again. "Yes, I can feel it." They continued walking until the sun began lowering in the sky. The light turned softer, more golden. Long shadows stretched across the ground. Daniel knew they still had time before evening, but he wanted to check their surroundings carefully. "Let's stop here for a moment," he said softly. Nalin nodded. She stood beside him, her eyes scanning the land. Then something changed in her expression. Her eyes widened just slightly, and her breath caught. She pointed toward the distant horizon, where the hills dipped into a small valley. A thin, rising column of smoke curled into the sky, steady, calm, not large but clear enough to see. Nalin whispered, almost in a breath, "Smoke signals." Daniel turned to her. "Is that your family?" She didn't speak right away. Her eyes glowed with recognition. Hope filled her features with bright softness. "It's like the kind they make," she said quietly. "It's gentle, not a warning. It means they are resting." Daniel felt warmth lift inside him. "Then we're close." Nalin nodded with deep emotion. "Yes, very close." She turned to Daniel with eyes full of gratitude, meaning more than words could express. "Thank you," she whispered. "You helped me find my way." Daniel felt a gentle calmness in her expression settle into his own heart. "You were brave, Nalin. I only walked beside you." They stood there for a quiet moment, watching the soft smoke rising peacefully into the evening sky, knowing it came from the people who had been waiting for her. Daniel and Nalin walked together through the wide, open land, moving carefully between tall rocks and soft patches of grass. The air felt cool, and a light breeze carried the scent of pine trees and early morning dew. They had been walking for some time, and both of them knew the journey was coming close to its end. Even though they had spent only a short time together, the silence between them felt comfortable now, not tense or fearful like it had been the first night. Nalin walked with steady steps, more confident now, but still watching the land around them with careful eyes. Daniel noticed the small signs she paid attention to: the shape of a hill, a group of bushes, a fallen tree, the direction of the wind. She read the land the way other people read books. Daniel felt a quiet respect for her strength and calmness, even in times of worry. He felt grateful that she trusted him enough to walk beside him. More than once, she pointed to something far away, a narrow path between two rocks, a place where the ground sloped gently, and explained that her people sometimes used these ways to travel safely. She spoke in a soft voice, and Daniel listened closely. He realized he had never understood how much knowledge lived in the land, how much it spoke to those who knew how to read it. After a while, Nalan stopped walking and looked toward the distance. A thin trail of smoke was rising above a canyon far ahead. It was only a small line, almost hidden by the sky, but she saw it instantly. She stood very still, her eyes focused. Then she breathed out slowly, almost like a sigh of relief. "My people," she whispered. Daniel also looked at the smoke, but he could not read it the way she could. To him, it looked like any smoke from a campfire, but he trusted her. This was her home, her land, her knowledge. He felt a small knot form in his chest, a mix of happiness and sadness. He was glad she had found her way back, but he knew their time together was ending. They continued walking until they reached a rocky rise that gave them a better view. From there, they could see the tops of canvas shelters far in the distance, just barely visible behind a group of trees. The place looked peaceful from far away, like a small, quiet community resting under the wide sky. Nalan stared at it for a long moment. Daniel saw her eyes shine with emotion, not tears, not fear, but deep relief. She had been brave through everything, but even the strongest hearts feel lighter when home is near. Daniel stopped a little behind her, giving her time. He did not want to rush her or step too close to her moment. He understood that this was something personal. After a minute, she turned to him. She looked calmer than she had ever since the night she knocked on his door. Her shoulders were relaxed, and there was a peaceful stillness in her face. She gave him a small, gentle smile. "Thank you," she said in her quiet voice. "You helped me when I was alone." Daniel nodded, unsure how to express everything he felt. He was not a man of many words. "I'm glad you're safe now," he said. "You'll be home soon." Nalan took a step closer, showing her trust. "You were kind to me," she said. "I will remember that." Daniel felt a warm feeling spread through his chest. He had not expected gratitude or praise. He had only done what he felt was right. But hearing her say it meant more than he expected. "You're welcome," he replied softly. For a moment they stood quietly in the calm morning air. Neither of them rushed to walk away. Daniel looked out at the land below, realizing he was seeing it differently now. He thought about how Nalan taught him little things during their journey, how certain plants told you where water might be, how footprints changed depending on the type of soil, how the wind carried information if you knew how to listen. She had shown him that the land was not empty or wild. It was full of stories and signs. Nalan took another careful look toward her village. In the distance, two small figures appeared, walking slowly along a narrow path. They were far away, but Daniel could see them well enough to know they were coming in her direction. Nalan recognized them immediately. Her face brightened. "My family," she said, her voice warm with joy. Daniel smiled. "Then I'll leave you here," he said gently. "They'll find you." Nalan looked at him, her expression serious but kind. "Will you be safe on your way back?" she asked. Daniel nodded. "I'll be fine. The land is quiet right now." She seemed satisfied with his answer. She reached into the small pack he had given her and took out one of the woven bracelets she had made from thin strands of plant fiber. She held it out to him. He looked surprised. "For me?" he asked. She nodded. "For kindness," she said simply. Daniel accepted it with care, feeling honored. He gently tied it around his wrist. It was light, almost weightless, but it meant something strong. "Thank you," he said. Nalin glanced again toward the figures approaching. They were closer now, moving with purpose. She turned back to Daniel and gave him a grateful smile. "Goodbye," she said softly. "Goodbye, Nalin," he replied. "Take care." She walked away slowly at first, then faster as she recognized the familiar way her family moved. Daniel watched her go. When the two distant figures saw her, they began to hurry. Even though he couldn't hear their voices from this distance, he could feel the emotion in the moment, the joy of a family finding someone they feared lost. When they finally reached her, they embraced her warmly. Daniel saw the relief in their movements, the gentleness with which they touched her shoulders and hair. Nalin pointed back toward him once, showing them the man who had helped her. Her family raised a hand in polite acknowledgement, and Daniel lifted his hand in return. It was a quiet, respectful exchange, two worlds meeting for only a second, recognizing each other with understanding. After that, Nalin and her family began walking back toward their village, staying close together. Daniel watched until they were too far to see clearly. Only then did he turn and begin the long walk back to his own cabin. As he made his way across the open land, Daniel felt different. The sky looked wider, the wind felt softer, and the path seemed full of quiet meaning. He thought about the night Nalin had stood trembling on his doorstep, asking for shelter. He thought about the fear she carried, the trust she slowly built, and the courage she showed on the journey. He realized that people could live very different lives and still share moments of kindness. When Daniel reached his cabin, the sun was beginning to set, coloring the sky in shades of orange and gold. He stepped inside and saw the stove standing quietly in the corner. There were a few small logs left from the night Nalin had helped him place the wood inside. The memory warmed him. He added another log, lit the fire, and watched the flames grow. The room filled with gentle warmth, and Daniel sat down, feeling peaceful. He knew he might never see Nalin again. Their paths belonged to different worlds. But he also knew that for one important moment in time, those worlds had come together in understanding and kindness. And each time he looked at the woven bracelet on his wrist, he remembered the brave girl who had stood at his door and asked only for fire, safety, and a place to rest.